We're moving now with this demonstration away from the snow scenes. Those of you who were with me for the last week or two, and I've chosen this picture deliberately because it's sort of hopeful. The sun's coming up. It's early morning. It's actually set. It's an internet photograph. I very rarely use those. I try and use my own or use one from somebody I know. This is a picture that I picked up a while ago on the internet. I tried to find it today and couldn't, despite putting all the clues in. But I think it's somewhere on the North Kent coast, possibly somewhere called Gravesend, and is a key. There are a number of keys that look like this, but I think that's where it is. But the reason I was interested in this picture was this fantastic atmosphere of the morning light. Not only see it in the sky, but of course reflected into the very still water. I thought with that picture, we've got potential here for interesting watercolor washes. The values between lights and dark are fantastic, and there's a great deal of atmosphere about this. And I think what seems at first possibly a complicated picture, hopefully we can make it more simple to paint, and we can in that case simplify what's going on here. Because there are some little difficulties possibly in the drawing of it, I asked if you'd be good enough to make your drawings before we begin and before I go straight into washes. But in my last session, I spent a little bit of time talking about perspective, and I'd just like to talk a little bit more about how I drew this. There are one or two very simple things that are important in this drawing, and then I will flick to one I did earlier. So I've got a blank sheet of paper here. I'm going to make a drawing, but if I tell you that the person whoever took this photograph must have been standing with their eye level roughly about here, over to here. Does that make sense? An eye level there. And as I've mentioned before, with perspective, that's a very useful thing to understand. This line here, imaginary line, is roughly where the eye level is of the person who took this photograph. And in terms of making a drawing, there are two lines that I want to point out which are useful to make your drawing work. The first one is this line here, which I'll draw in here, which is something like that line. And the other one is, now this is the principle I was explaining the last couple of weeks, is that when things are going away from you, and these boats are going away from us, when things are going away from you, if they are below your eye level, they're going to be coming up to that line, imaginary line. And if they're above your eye level, they're going to be coming down. Now, most of what we're interested in here is about what's underneath our eye level. So our eye level takes us, if I put that there, sort of everything there is roughly below our eye level. And you can see that the boats that are nearest us are further down than these boats here. And so the other line, which is quite useful to be aware of, is this sort of line, something like that. And I'll just do a little bit of drawing to show you how that fits in. Those two lines are really useful to be aware of. If the person who took this photograph were much higher up than this eye level, then this line here would be much more at an angle like that. and you'd be looking down onto the tops of the boats. We'll be seeing much more of what's going on the decks and everything, because we'd be much higher up. And if his eye level were any higher, then of course this angle would be much tighter. So if I could just put in a couple of little, let's put a boat in something like that here, and then another one like that, another one maybe like that, and you can see the boats are going up till they break that imaginary line, and you've got things going on here and shadows going on there. And so this line, this idea that the boats are uptight to this imaginary line is really quite useful to be aware of when you're drawing. So as an artist, when you sit down or you decide to do a little drawing like this, be aware of this imaginary line, which is your eye level. And it will depend entirely on where you are. Wherever your eye level is, if anything's directly in front of it, it will always be horizontal. And if all the verticals, masts, whatever, are all vertical, they're not going to change. They might get smaller, but they're not going to change. What will change when things are going away from you is if it's below your eye level, it'll come up to it. And if it's above your eye level, it'll come down to it. And later on, just to show this little angle of the this bit of the quayside here, it's ever so slightly coming down because it's going away from us. Anyway, I think that's enough for that. When I'm now going to flick over and show you one that I did earlier. There we go. And what this is very similar to the drawing I sent out. I've been aware of this line, which is the imaginary eye line. I've been aware that these boats are at that sort of angle to it. I've drawn in the minimum I think I need to help me to paint the boats. I haven't put in fenders, but well, I have one or two, but I haven't put in lots and lots of detail. In fact, it all gets so confusing here. It's a lovely confusion of light and color, and we'll come back to that in a moment. I've very lightly drawn in the background buildings here, and they do go very, very light. They almost disappear into the sunlight here. And I made one or two little marks for some of the masts here, just help me home in on it. I've drawn the reflections as a bit of a block, and I haven't put in lots of other little detail here. And the reason that I haven't done that is because I don't really want to end up just painting over lines, delicate lines that I've drawn, because I'm going to end up maybe being a bit tight. So a lot of my subsequent drawing is going to be just with a brush. You know, keep your fingers crossed, hope it goes roughly in the right direction. But if we've got the basis of the watercolor painting going right, then it will accommodate pretty much anything that we throw at it by way of drawings later on. Okay, so that's where I'm working on the basis that you have all got to something like that. And that is the first step in the 4 steps that I will take this painting through. May I just make a comment just about materials and things, because I know that there's some new people here, and I did mean to mention this earlier. The paper I'm using is about 14 inches by 11. You can use whatever size paper you want. This particular paper is a rag content, good quality watercolor paper. It's Sanders Watman paper, a Waterford paper, and it's 300 grams, and it's cold pressed, or sometimes that's known as NOT, N-O-T. So it's, if it were hot press, it would be very smooth. And if it were rough, it would be much rougher. So it's somewhere in between the two. There is a texture to this, which is quite nice to work on. The important point is that I'm using this rag content paper, and it's good quality watercolor paper. All my paints here, which I've sent out information on, but I will talk about each one as I use them, are artist quality, professional quality. I think most of these are Winsor & Newton, but there are lots of other good qualities you could use. And the brushes that I'm going to use, I think I'm probably going to use these three brushes. And I'll talk about these as I use each one. I don't think I'll go towards any other brushes. So just those three brushes. So that's the material side of it. And the method side is that I'm breaking this painting down into 4 steps. The first of which is this, where we arrive at the drawing, having considered the composition and so forth. Now, as far as the composition is concerned, you might notice that I've given myself more of this here and less of this here. I've sort of moved it a little bit that way. And in my drawing, I haven't tried to be too precise about what exactly these boats are. I've just done boat shapes. They're going to get lost in this darkness to a certain extent anyway. Okay, so I'll move on now to the next step. Let me just confirm that everyone's happy with what I've said there. Is anyone, if you're not, just unmute and say so, but I think that should go along. There was someone who said they wanted me to comment on their drawing earlier, and I wasn't able to make contact with them. So hopefully that's gone some way to explaining how I've made my drawing, how I'm aware of the perspective, and how little. I mean, you can do much more drawing than that if you wish, but for me that's quite enough. Okay. Now, the second step in this 4-step process is the wash. And in some ways, this is really exciting. And that's why I chose this picture. We're going to go from this warm, this yellow. It's going to sort of become redder and less yellow, and then move into a cooler blue here. And that is reflected down here, except that the reflections are a bit darker. So here, this area is just a little bit more yellow, and then moves in to quite a dark blue here. There's a big contrast between that and this. Exactly why that is, there must be some physical reason for it, but let's just say that's what it is, and we'll go for it. Definitely this reflection is darker than the top. Now I want to get all of that done and put in here in this next stage, in the wash. Plus, I want to make sure that where you've got little glints of light on tops of cabins and little possibly little bits that are sticking up here, there's a number of them here. They're quite strong in the foreground. They become less so as they go back. I want to make sure that some of that warmth is taken across here so that we can make use of it later on when we're painting darker colors over the top. Okay. So with that in mind, let's see how we'll go with this. It's going to involve lots of water, and wherever possible, try and do it once. Try and sweep the color in, and then let the water and the paint do the work for you. If you do something and you think, oh, it's not working terribly well, I'll come back in again. You might find that you're going to bring too much water in, or you're going to end up not letting the water spread out the pigment that we've got here. So if in doubt, leave it. Put it down, leave it, and then we're going to let it dry before we move on. So I'm going to be using this brush, which is a squirrel a mop brush. It's about 1 inch, but any big brush will do. The great thing about this is that it will hold lots of water. It doesn't have to be squirrel, it can be imitation, anything that holds water, but also it does really well in that it bends and it goes to a point, which we may or may not use with this brush, but that's great. So that's going to hold the water. Going to be mixing in this palette here what I need, and the colors that, let me tell you the colors that I'm planning on using for this. This yellow is Aurelian. A compatible one would be, say, cadmium yellow. Aurelian's more transparent though. So this mid yellow, I've got a cool yellow, a very warm yellow, and I'm going to put this cool yellow down first here, and then I'm going to mix a little bit of this orangey red, Windsor red here, just bring a little bit into it whilst it's all still wet, and take that across the page. And then what blue? I'm going to use one of these blues. This is cerulean and is a very cool blue, and this is cobalt, which is a sort of mid blue. That's a good point. Which one shall I use? I think I'll go with the cerulean. Okay, it doesn't matter, but and get it to merge in. And then down here, I'm going to use the same sort of yellows here, but bring more red into it to make it a little darker. And then I'm going to use cobalt for my blue, this one here, up here and also down here. And I'm going to bring a little bit of a red color, either that or that. I'll talk it through you as just to make it darker, making sure that in this area here, I have some of this yellow light so that I'm able to pick it out for the reflections, that where the light is reflecting off it. Okay, here we go. This is full of water, this brush, and I'll begin by picking up this Aurelian here. Now, some people might spray this with a water spray, as I've got here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use lots of water. Don't be frightened. That's what it's called, watercolor. Use lots of water, and let's see if we can then make it a little bit darker and change the color. So I'm going to put that in here, bring that down here. It can go over the boats. That's all wet down this area here. Now, it's a bit more paint, a little bit of red. Let's put some of that red in there. Let's put a bit more red in. It's turning red. I'll come back to this area here. Just make that a little, yeah, and let's take this a little bit more red still, this area here. And now clean my brush, pick up some cobalt and put that in here, and let that put a little bit, make it a little bit stronger. Things always get lighter when they dry, a little bit stronger. Okay, I'm going to move down to here now and put some of this blue in. Oh no, before I forget, let's go back to this yellow and just make sure I've got some yellow in there. Okay, that's fine. And then everything's very wet at the moment. It's all sort of bleeding into itself. go for some of this. In fact, I'm going to make that a little bit stronger. As I said, I would small. Let's just make that a little more yellow there, a little more red. Okay, and come down to this area here, the blue, and I want to make it a bit darker. So I think what I'll do is I'll add some burnt sienna. Try a little bit of burnt sienna, a bit more blue, because I want it to be moving. And let's just leave it at that and see what we've got. A little bit more blue here, maybe. There we go.
Judy's got a question for you. Did you wet the paper first?
No, I didn't wet the paper. I just used lots of water on my brush. You're very welcome to wet the paper first, but I felt I could control it a little bit more, although the whole thing's out of control anyway. And now everything's wet. And we do need, when we move on to the next stage, we're going to have a completely dry a piece of paper, but I don't want to dry it, force dry it now. I just want the paints bleeding in here. And let's just see what happens. All right, everybody. So get your water out, get your paints, slop it around, keep it nice and wet, and then sit back and hope it does the job for you. Okay, so this is now the third step in the painting, having done the drawing as a first step, the washes as a second step. Now we're going to put in here darker colors, other colors, including shadows and reflections, and then set it up for the final stage, which will be putting in various details. I'm going to work down. In fact, I don't need to do anything at all to the washes here. I'm not going to touch the washes at all here. The washes at all here.
It's breaking
We're going to be
up.
painting the background of the key buildings. I'm sorry?
You're breaking up,
Do we have-
Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, you're breaking up all the time.
Yes, I think we just have to keep going because I think that it's to do with the signal.
Hmm.
All right. Okay, then hopefully the what I'm doing will describe it as much as possible. And I'll try and use as many hand signals as I can as well. So we're going to do this first, then this, and then the shadows. I'm going to use this brush and this brush. Can you hear this, Lewis?
Yes, you're coming out loud and clear.
Oh, okay. All right. I mean, it might just be a temporary thing. Just give me the odd shout saying it's going all right, because I'm working in a vacuum in deepest, darkest
I
West
will
Dorset.
make encouraging noises.
Much better
Yeah.
now, much better.
Okay. So I'm going to paint this background here, the key side. So it's dark here, and it gets lighter and lighter, and it virtually disappears here. And there is a reflection of it down here. But importantly, I'm going to take it down to this pencil line here and just leave a little bit of the yellow light showing, and you'll see. So it gives you ever so slightly, as you can see in my practice painting, this little divide here. We're going to go from dark through here. The color that I'll use for this will be cobalt blue and this light red. Let's see how that will give me a sort of a violet color here. And I want to get it so that it's dark enough for this, and then I'll keep adding water to it here and here till it's a very watery solution, but it's still got some sort of definition to it. And if necessary, I'll use a paper with tissue or towel to dab it off. Let's see how it goes. You can see what I'm doing here. I've mixed up this. I'm going to just make that a little bit stronger, wee bit stronger, a little bit of red, not too much red. It's gone too red violet there. So bring some blue back into sort it out here. And
Which red was it, please, Mike?
I use the orangey red. Use an orangey red. You'd get away with using any red at all with the blue, but I'm ever so slightly going to grey it down here, so it's not quite such a strong violet, by adding a little bit of raw sienna, just a little bit in there. That will ever so slightly grey it down. Basically, I've added blue, red, and yellow, which sort of comes a muddy sort of color. So working now with this with this little squirrel brush, which is pretty much the same as this big brush, but it's smaller. It's a good wash brush, but it also goes to a point. I'm going to take my painting along here, and as I come to little bits where there might be light catching whatever it is, buildings, boats set up on ramps or something, I'm just going to paint around those a little bit, and you'll see what I'm doing. And when I get to a certain point, I'll add some more water, and then I'll add some more water, and I'll take it down here and see how it looks. All right, here we go. So this will be the darkest that I'll do. Let's let's put that in there. And you can see what I'm doing a little bit. I have no idea exactly what these shapes are. I'm hoping that they'll all be useful to me a little bit later on. Take that along here. And in a moment, I'm going to show you how I'll add some darkness to it. But I wanted to keep everything pretty soft here. Any little bits of paper that show through, that's great. That could be something glinting off a window or something like that. Here we are. Now I want to try and soften that down a bit. So I'm going to bring a bit of water to it, and just and it will kind of paint itself a little bit into the water will run between. Let's take that along here a bit more. This is all still a little bit wet here, which is good. And again, I have no idea why all these little bits and pieces are here. Let's add a bit more water to it. Still. And a bit more water. Get rid of some of that paint and take that down here. You can see it's getting lighter all the time. And I've made up all these buildings. There's nothing sacrosanct about what the shapes are. Here we are, we're getting lighter. Put a bit more water in. And I'm going to take that down to this pencil line that I spoke of before. I won't paint under that. I'm going to do that separately because I want to be able to. No, I will paint under that. What am I talking about? Yes, I will. So I'm going to put in but I'll make this a little bit darker. Remember I said I was going to make the reflections just ever so slightly darker. It's not much. And I'm going to, it's maybe even darker than I want it to be. So I'll just take a little bit of tissue over that and see how that goes. The other thing I'm going to do is, because this is all a little bit wet, go back and mix up a stronger color using the same two colors a little bit, two red, and just touch in here because this is still a little bit wet. It's drying out here a bit, so I'll put a bit of water on it. That's the sort of softness that I wanted to get. So what I'm doing is I'm just putting a bit of water around it like that. Add a bit more red to it maybe. And this is, you know, who knows what it is. It's just little bits of breaking up what we've got here. I think I can use much weaker color here. But try not to add anything with water. Just use strong paint because you've got the water already there. Right, and that's taken that around the tops of all sorts of little bits and pieces here. It's given me the darkness going to the lightness. I've added a little bit of a reflection in there. Let's just soften the edge a bit of that reflection and just leave it to paint itself a little bit. That's the first thing I'm going to do on here. And then I'm going to introduce some of the colors that we see here, blues, little bits of reds, maybe. You can make them up as you wish, but these are things that we'll be painting a darker color over. But I would like to have something of the awnings, the edges of boats and things that will be useful to me a little later on. So let's do some blue. Pick up cobalt maybe. And this may be too vivid a blue, so I'll change it. So I'm going to put in edges of windows, awnings, maybe, who knows. It's quite important to leave little bits left out, which will be the light catching tiny little areas a little later on. Let's just put that in as the darkness of the window around here. If I need to make it a bit darker, I'll come back to it, something like that. So can you see I'm deciding to put in and working down here because this is all wet at the moment. One or two little colors which will be useful. More blues. You know, I've lost track on which belongs to which boat and so forth. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that and hope for the best that there were. We've got various bits of blue. Any others that I want to pop in here? Let's. I think I'll. I've talked before of this, of a little bit of green. I've got a sap green here, which I think of as a convenience green, in that it's just instantly makes green. I don't have to mix the blue and the yellow, and that's quite useful at the time. That's a bit too vivid for me, so I'll just add a little bit of the blue to it, and let's see if we can put something in which might be here. You're really making it up. I'll there's some sort of a tent here.
Is this cobalt blue, Mike?
I've used cobalt blue. Yes, I mean, honestly, you can use whatever you like. Really, I'm just dropping some colors in here. I'm not making them too vivid at the moment. Just so that we've got, so I may end up painting over some of these. The lights shining down on here. Let's just put another bit of green somewhere around here, maybe. And I'm going to put something on the fronts of boats. So these look in the main rather like sort of workman-like boats. So let's pick up a bit of crimson, sort of crimson color, and put something here. And I'll do one here, I think. So I'm making this up, really. I'm just using the photograph to give me some sort of a clue, a little bit of color there. I'll add a little bit of the orangey red, maybe. Add a bit of yellow to it, and pop in some fenders here, things that may be hanging around the boats. That a lot of these will get pretty lost in the reflections and so forth. Let's see if I want to add any more color at this stage. Not necessarily. Again, I'm working my way around my paint palette and seeing the boats down here are pretty flattened out in terms of. No, I think that will be fine. Let's see if maybe I'll make a window there. A couple of windows is quite useful. Okay, just working my way around. Put another window in there. Just introduce some color there.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I'm going to bring in some shadows. I'm going to paint the boats first, and then the reflections afterwards. In the main, the bottoms of the boats. May I show my practice? The bottom, the hulls of the boats, in the main, are going to be lighter than here. Now, it's a very tricky thing knowing whether reflections are darker or lighter. They often think that if you've got a light colored above a reflection, that in still water, the reflection's a bit darker. To be honest with you, you kind of need to be sitting here in this morning light, looking at it closely to work it out for yourself. But in order that I can distinguish a little bit the bottoms, the shape of the boat sitting on this very flat water, I'm going to paint the shadows, the shadow that's on the boat here, so that it's a little bit lighter than this. And so I'll put the boats in first, but I also want there to be a soft link between, particularly here, between the reflection and the shadows. So I'll show you how I'll do that. All these masts and things like that can follow later on, but when I do paint the reflections, I'll add those in, just so that they all, because the reflections are pretty flat all the way along, but they do get lighter and lighter as they disappear away from us. So this is all pretty dry here. I'm going to start popping in here some various shadows and marks, but if you were to look closely at my painting here, there's no real rhyme or reason why things are put in. I'm just aware of there being light touching things, dark areas, and just a little bit of color showing through. We can put all these masks in as details later on. So please, in a sense, just be brave and go at it so that you're just making some sort of almost abstract statement about what is there. So I'm going to mix. Yes.
Mike, can I interrupt you for one moment? Can you just revise what colour was used for the windows?
I put cobalt on that, but I'm probably going to be painting over them later on anyway. So I just popped in various blues there, which might be of some use. More than anything else, I wanted to establish the windows were darker than some of the areas around them, like that. Okay. Now I'm going to mix up a dark color and start putting in all but the little details in what's going on here before I move down onto these boats. So the colors I'll use for that will be ultramarine blue, this one I'm mixing here. So we've been using cobalt blue up to now. I'm going to use ultramarine blue, and I'm going to mix some burnt sienna with it. Now that's going to give me, if I put too much burnt sienna, it's going to make it quite brown, and I don't want it as brown as that. But if I can bring it back now. So this is a sort of a shadow color made up of ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And I'm going to make it reasonably strong. I'm going to use the same brush, which is this mop brush, because it goes to a little point. And I'm going to work along here as left to right, because I'm right-handed, so I'll try not to smudge it. And again, as with where we painted the background buildings, there's little bits I've left out. I'm going to just put some of this in here, leaving little gaps, making up marks, so that it looks maybe as in some places the light is touching on other bits. You see what I'm doing? So make, and this is where it's over to you to just go with those windows. It's over to you to create your own almost sort of abstract shapes, just lots of little, it'll be fine. It'll be fine when you stand back and look at it, and no one's going to ask. So in fact, I'm going to make these windows just in some places a little bit darker, adding I'll take that down to the hull. I'm going to come into the hulls of these boats here. Let's just bring in some other details here. Now I could go, as I go along, I could be bringing masts in, but I'm deliberately leaving those so that we'll deal with those later on, because it might just get a bit confusing. Let's just put in some. We will be coming back to this and doctoring it a little bit to make it work, but we got some sort of mixture of, let's see if I can put a couple of fenders in here. Something that might look like metal rods or okay, let's put some in there. And I'm working my way across here. And in fact, I will be getting, by the time I get down here, that this color will have more water in it. It will be becoming lighter. there's a sort of interesting tent here. So I'm going to put a darkness under it. Do something more with that. If you want something to appear lighter, in fact, as I go along, if I want to make one or two little vertical marks like that at this stage, feel free to do so. Now, for instance, I'm using my rigger brush here, just a few little marks, but I'm in the main, I'm going to come back and deal with that later on. Yeah, I will come back and deal with it later on. So here we go. Right, hopefully this is making some sense how we're working along here. Leaving little bits where the light is glinting. We can cover, if that's too much later on, we can cover those up. That's not a problem. If you do want to make any lines, by all means do so, but I'm in the main, I'm going to use my main brush here. So I'm assuming everyone's making up what they can see, which is pretty confusing in the distance, but I'm taking it all down to where the holes are in the main. And I think I'll add a bit of water now as I'm moving down here, just make it a little bit lighter. Everything becomes a little flatter now at this stage. Not even the lights showing terribly well on the shadows. The whole thing is a bit flatter. We'll come to that in a moment. So put another window in there. There we go. When we come to do the details, we can bring in some of the far distance masts and some of the closer masts and everything. You could do it now, but let's just do that one bit at a time. I'm going to, that's too green. It's too strong, that green. So I'm just going to block it out a little bit. Right, and that's putting in a whole jumble of superstructure there. That green is now too strong for me. So I'll just run a bit of a light shadow over it. Now I'm going to move on down here and put in the hulls, remembering that we're going to get lighter and lighter with them here. And if I can, I'll bring the reflections straight away up to touch. Now, or shall I leave that just to make it easier for you? Yeah, just to make it easier, I'm just going to do the hulls. We'll do the reflections here as the details later on. If necessary, I'll re-wet this a little bit to make that work. Okay, so the color I'll use is going to be the color I have been using up until now. It is going to be a bit darker here as it goes along there. So I've got ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. Just put a little bit of raw sienna on that. A bit more blue. Let's see what we've got here. I'll mix up a little bit more paint. That's a bit too blue for me, so a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of raw sienna. Let's see what I can get out of that. And I'm moving down to the hulls. Again, there are various bits of light that are caught on top of the hulls here, so I'll try and leave those. And using the same brush, take that down to so I said I'll just do the hulls, and we'll come back and do the reflections later on. Here we are. That one. These are straight because they're on flat water. I'm going to drop a little bit of stronger color, just mix that up again, the same colors I've been using. Just that might help to show some difference between these two boats, if indeed it's necessary. Here we go. I'm going to make this one a little bit lighter, a little bit more water. And swing that up here.
Somebody asks if they've not got burnt sienna, what would you recommend?
A little bit of raw burnt umber.
Sorry, burnt umber.
Burnt
okay.
umber.
Sorry, raw sienna. She said she hasn't got.
Yeah, it's quite. It's just something that's got some red in. And now we're sort of working down here with lighter colors, just a little bit of water maybe. And this is kind of flattened out here a wee bit. So a bit lighter than we've got down this end. And the boats put in. And I think I'm going to stop there, just let you paint all that. If we were doing it myself, I'd go straight in and do these reflections, but we'll let that dry. We'll wet it where we need to wet it again and put the reflections in. Again, I'm going to work down, so I'm going to do masts and superstructure and other little details up here, because the next stage is details, and then move on down to the reflections. So that is the end of the third step in the watercolor. Deliberately left the reflections out, but put in other colors, darker colors, from the units at the back here, the buildings at the back of the quay, getting lighter and lighter, to various colors that might be showing. Don't forget, this is very early in the morning. If you were standing here, came straight out of, you opened your window straight away, you probably wouldn't see a lot of what was going on here. It would all seem very dark to you. And so we want to get that overall impression of light against and on the boats and them being dark. But we want to put enough in here to mean that when you sort of look at it a second time, you start to get some of the detail. So that's as far as I'm going with this just at the moment. So we've got a number of pencil marks on here. Don't worry about those. The pencil I use, I didn't tell you, but it was a soft pencil, and that's quite useful because it makes it a bit easier to rub out. I'm going to be using this rigger brush, which is probably the oldest of my brushes here, and it's a synthetic brush. I can't even remember where I got it from. I think it was a De La Rowney. There's a little bit of blue there that tells me it might have been De La Rowney, but it's interestingly enough, it's called a rigger brush, and we are doing rigging. So we're using it for the reason it was designed, a long brush here to help paint in the rigging. So there we are. But it's an incredibly versatile brush. I don't think I'll be using it like that here, but I probably use it as much on its side as I do on its point. But here, it is quite literally the rigging I'm going to be using it for. So I'm going to use, continue using this smaller of my mop brushes, which is Squirrel, and I'm going to be using this rigger brush. So if you've got something like that, that will be very useful. The rigger brush is, you might think a brush with a shorter point would be more useful to use, but actually that's more likely to give you dollops of paint, whereas a rigger brush, you can hold it away from the paper and paint it quickly. I'm going to emphasize that you're probably going to need to paint quickly and lightly for some of this. Not all of it will work, but as long as most of it does, it'll be fine. Right, how are we doing on the readies?
Lots of readies actually now. Lots of readies.
We're still living in the studio, kitchens, but the electricians and the carpenters all the lighting is in, and in fact, when I go back in after this, I think all the electrics will be working in the kitchen. But it'll be a couple of weeks yet because they've cut a template for the worktop, and that takes about 10 days to be cut out of granite or quartz or whatever we're doing it in.
How exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's great. Right, I'm going to roll into this now. If anybody feels that I shouldn't, please shout out. But I think I tend to sort of talk my way in, and right, this is all dry, and that's fine. And in fact, in some cases, I may not want it dry, so I might have to wet it. But I'm going to work down here, so I'm going to be putting in detail at the top half of the painting, including the masts, although I could always go back and add another one if I wanted to. And the detail is going to vary between really light tones and colors, where you see some of these masts which have been blotted out by the rising sun. I'll put those in, and if they are not, if they're too dark, I'll probably end up with a bit of tissue just dabbing them off. But I'm going to work with these masts in the background, so light. I'll come forward and do some of the darker masts, and then I'm also going to bring in some of the detail, little details here, and hopefully that will become clear. Again, a lot of this is something you'll kind of make up as you go along. I'm going to be using, I'll use this color that I've got here, which is ultramarine blue and burnt sienna or burnt umber, something like that. But where I want it to be darker, I'll use it thicker. And where I want it to be lighter, I'll pick it up with more water in and so forth. So I'll start off putting well, I'll work this way and go between light and dark. So I've got sort of various masks up here I'm going to put in. I'm conscious that they're getting lighter and lighter. They will disappear almost completely there, so I can put one or two in there. Because the further away a mast is, the lighter it will become. They do vary a little bit, but we're just putting in something here which will give us some kind of an illusion of there being lots of masks. Now I've mixed up, as you can see in my palette here, and I'm using, I'll use the rigger until I get to the reflections pretty much. But I'm just wondering whether that might be a little bit too dark. So let's just, it's not that dark. Let's just make a few marks. This is where you're just going to have to be brave. And usually it works better for you if you're prepared to sweep it up quickly than if you go along too cautiously. So let's have a look. So we're going to have some masks here. Yeah, that's probably, because remember, things will dry lighter. Got some masks here. Yeah, that's probably about right. And if you want to put some looking as if they're further away, just add a bit of water to them and they'll just give the illusion of being further away. I'm moving along the key. You put in as many as you want. And you can always go back and add some more. Let's just, that's a bit darker. So I'm barely touching the paper with some of these marks I'm making here. Remember, we're going towards the sunlight. In fact, I'll add a little bit of water to it. So it's quite loose. I don't think I want to go much more than that, really, unless I've got some masks which are going to be the darker ones, the nearer ones. So we've got a whole lot of masks in here. Let's go back to my dark bit here. Do I want to add any extra little, who knows what they are, buildings, piles of stuff that you get on key sites. If I want to make them darker, which I want to make one or two darker, I'm going to go back to my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna and make it thicker and just make one or two marks here. If you look at the photograph there, so odd things happening, boats turned upside down, who knows. And if I want to bring in, so I'm playing around with a thick mixture of my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna or burnt umber or something like that. And also I've got some thinner ones here. Let's make a slightly stronger mast here. Who knows? And put another one here. And as we did when we were popping down the information about the superstructure here, if you want to include any little darker bits, if you want to cover over little bits, none of us know what any of these things are in the background. I'm trying to keep above the all the boats, and I'm going to come down into the boats in a moment, deliberately doing that. Let's just add a bit of water to that, and one or two details here. Okay, that's entirely up to you. You can see it's your little painting. You're working at. Now I'm going to move down to the boats, and in the main here, I am going to go for stronger, darker details. So I mix up the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna here, and I've got some strong colors, and I think here I just want to place emphasis on certain areas. And it might be, if I wanted to make this color even darker, if I want to do that, I use a color called neutral tint here. Payne's gray would be another one, a similar one, and I just add it to it. It's not black, it's Payne's gray is a bluey color, and neutral tint is a more translucent color. But if I wanted to do that, so just adding little touches of these windows, maybe just at the top of a window a little bit.
Someone's asking if you've got any tips for drawing straight lines, Mike.
Rulers. But no, not really. I think, yeah, I think the best tip I can give you is do it quickly. That would be the same if you were painting things in your house, doing the DIY. It's amazing how if you're too cautious and you slow down, you'll get a wobbly line. But if you're brave and go at it with a sweep, you often get a much straighter line.
You're also supposed to wait 3 days to check it.
Oh, it's a good one, yes.
Because after 3 days, it looks much straighter than it does when you first do it.
Yeah, well, it absolutely, yes. There's obviously sort of little goblins come out at night and straighten your lines up for you, don't they? And okay, so where I think I need to put in some other little detail, I can make some I don't know what you call these things around boats where they stop you falling off. Not stays. That's but fenders or something like that. We just put some details. You're really just making the whole thing a jumble. The more you jumble it up, the more it will look as if there are lots of boats there. It's just so I'm moving along here. I've deliberately not come down onto the boats themselves. The substructure onto the leaving that for a moment. All right, let's put a few little more details in here. Yeah, I like that one about leaving it 3 days and someone will come along and sort it out for you. That's clever. We got various bits sticking out. Let's do that of some of the boats. These will form part of the reflections in many cases, and put a few little anchor things here. Now I'm going to put these masks in now, and however you need to get your painting stand over or otherwise, I think I'm just going to turn this around a little bit. I find it easier to make one or two marks here. So I'm going for one here. Put another one there. And then let's have a few. Now, if you run your brush with not a lot of water on it down, so it just clips the paper a little bit, you'll find that you'll get some of these stays coming in and not being too thick. Okay, a lot of them are going to be lost anyway when they get to in front of the sunshine we've got here. Okay, I'm just going around popping some details here.
Mike, could you move your painting slightly to the right and up?
Is that how is that? Because I can't.
That's
see.
better. Thank you.
Okay.
That's good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
no, I haven't taken it away. Maybe this is the sort of painting that you do need to leave a couple of days and come back and see if there's any more. I'm going to. I've got a lot of yellow here, and a lot of it is in shade. So what I'll do is, just standing back, looking at that, I'll pick up this shadowy color with ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt sienna, something like that. And let's just see what I'll do. For instance, I'll take that over there. So that I'm still leaving little bits catching the light. Let's take one across here. Just sweep it across, and it'll dry and show up the fact that it's in shadow. Do I want to do anything more? Just a bit here, maybe. I've got too much light. I just want it glinting a little bit more. Take that one back. Again, it's almost like abstract painting. I'm just trying to catch little bits of light. Just the odd little glint of light is going to tell us much more than having too much light there. There we go. Right. Okay, so the bottoms of our boats here are all dry, and there are a number of different ways we could do this. I want the reflections to be darker in the main than this bit of boat, but I do want them to. I don't want such a sharp line in them. So I think the way I'll do that is I'll just run a little bit of water over the boats themselves here, and then I'll paint in the reflections, and where the reflection touches the little bit of water I've got on the boat, providing it's not too wet, it will just provide a soft line where they're mixing together. So I'll move on and do that. We're just short on 2 hours. Okay. Doesn't matter if there's a bit of color in this, but here we are. I've got some water that I'll use there, but I'm also going to mix up some more of my shadow here. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue as I've used before. Can everyone, is that okay for the picture? Lois, can you see?
Yes, sorry, I muted myself. You couldn't hear me. Yes.
No, no, that's right. It's because I might have been moving it around. And in so doing, we're going to have maybe a little more definition here. And although we got lots of definition with the reflections, it's sort of flattening out a little bit there. And yeah, I think the way to do that, maybe we'll kind of do one boat at a time. So I've got my reflection color that I'm going to be using there, which I'm going to be putting in the main here. And let's see if this works. So I've got, I'm going to paint that over maybe the first few boats. So we've now got wet on those boats here. And I'll move now and put in this relatively strong, let's make it a bit stronger, reflection color. And let's see how that goes. So we make that a bit stronger. Because I want it to be darker. And just take it up to the edge of it. We're going to bring it down here. I'm using my big brush at the moment, and I'll show you what I'll do to get some of the details. So we're going to take that up here. So working fairly quickly at this stage, and that's why I drew in roughly these shapes, but you can make them up as you want. And then with my rigger brush, I'm going to put in some of the details. You can get away with murder here. You can put in whatever you like. Do you see? And because we're using the same sort of color and it's going into the paint, it will look as if it's all working together. There is a mast I'm going to put here, so let's just put that down there. And anything else that you want to pop in. So let's work our way down here now. Slightly lighter. It's got more water on this. Let's do exactly the same here. And this is all sort of wet. I'm also going to get a slightly darker bit here and just run that. So as little water as possible on this, and just run that here. Okay, and hopefully that will give us some little delineation there. It'll all work its way in. I want this. What's happening here? Let's just add a big mast here, and a few other little details. I'm going to take this all the way across here and then work across it quickly now before it starts to dry on me. This is and using some of this stronger paint. Something's gone wrong here, but let's not worry about it. Let's hope it will just a little bit touch. Let's see. These fenders. Let's see if that's going to give us what we want. And it's not doing exactly what you wanted to do, then the thing is not to fuss with it. And okay, let's bring a few little of these stays.
Someone's asking, was your paper wet to begin with?
No, it wasn't. No. So what's happened no, I wet the boats and I let the painted on dry, and I let the water come up, and obviously I've added a bit more water than I wanted, so I'm getting a sort of bloom there. But let's leave it. Let's leave it and see what happens. Yeah, in fact, I'm just going to do that, and then stand back and see if there's anything more I want to do to this. We've got yeah, I'm going to put a stronger mask there, which is I've got that in my practice painting. Let's just see if I'll put that in here, so something a little more dominant. Just there, mix. Go back to those two colors I've been mixing up until now. I'll try to do this without smudging, so I'm going to have a sort of mask that does okay, and that one. No, wait, 2 hours, and we've had a few technical issues here. Now, do I want to make anything a little bit darker? Do I mean, I can go around with a little bit of white and touch it in, but I'm trying to avoid doing that unless I really have to. So I'm just working around my picture and sort of half closing my eyes, squinty-eyed, as Mike Miller said a moment ago, and seeing whether a few little marks here or there would make any difference. These boats are sort of disappearing into their own reflections a little bit. That is much lighter than the photograph, but I've done that deliberately so we can see. The photograph will always make things darker. There. So that's that. I wasn't expecting to happen, so we'll just have to see whether we'll accept that later on. But if I start trying to do anything with it now, it'll get worse. It may just become what happens when you do watercolors. You get weird things happening, and that was because I brought a bit too much water back into here. Lois, I think we've probably gone as far as we're going to take that lady's advice and wait 3 days for someone to come along and finish the painting off, which I rather like that.